board would like to respond as part of the work plan.
Okay.
Does that work?
Yep. Sounds good.
I'm going to start letting everybody into the room. Good evening, everyone. As before, we are both live streaming and recording this. Will be posted on YouTube at the end of the meeting. Everyone, I think, is on mute. If your name is not your name, like the name on the screen is not your name, please go ahead and change it now. If you are having any problems with that, please speak up. I'll be happy to do that for you. All right. Good evening, everybody. It is 5 p.m., so we are going to go ahead and get started. Welcome to meeting number 3 of the Public Safety Advisory Board. We have had our first 2. First one, we did a more introduction and started working on the work plan. Last meeting, we focused heavily on the officer-involved shooting, and we'll be having an update on that from the police chief. But to get started, I'd actually like to introduce you to somebody new who has joined the planning team and the staff, Eduardo Ramos. He's with the City of Tigard. He just joined as a management analyst. We'll let him introduce himself, what his role is going to be for the board, and his experience with the city.
Yes, good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Eduardo Ramos. I use the pronouns he and him. I joined the city manager's office after having previously served in the communications division as the digital communications coordinator. And I, among other things, the Public Safety Advisory Board will be one of my responsibilities. So any questions that you have, I'll help facilitate and answer.
Eduardo, I'm so sorry, you're muted. I was trying to admit somebody.
No, it's okay. I think it broke right in between when I was about to mention. I've updated the website for the Public Safety Advisory Board. It's a shorter link, so it's tigard-or.gov/PSAB. And that's where you can direct people for public comment. I'll be posting meeting minutes, previous comments, and all of the work that you'll be doing throughout your time here. But I'm excited to be here tonight and work with you.
Great, thank you, Eduardo. And I'm going to move on to roll call. Tammy, if you wouldn't mind unmuting people as we go down the list. So first, Commander McDonald.
Here.
Thank you. Officer Nunn. Shelby Rahala.
Yes, here.
Judge O'Brien, Michael O'Brien. And Abdi Rahim Muhammad. Is Abdi not here? I thought I'd seen him earlier.
No, it just didn't let me unmute. Sorry about that. I'm here.
Great. And Emilio Calderon.
Here. Sorry.
And Liz Newton.
Here.
John Trin.
Present, thank you.
Jimmy Brown,
Present.
and Lee Landers had told me he would not be attending tonight. Patty Lofgren,
I'm here.
and Justin Lowe.
Present.
Danny Rauda, is Danny Rauda not here? I saw him earlier. Okay.
Here.
Valerie Sasaki,
Here.
Scheherazade Wayland,
Here.
and Jeff Mott.
Here.
Thank you. And I think I saw Michael O'Brien join.
So it's asking me to unmute, which is not. I don't think that this muting unmuting thing works very well, to be honest with you. I mean, I think it would be better if people just had the ability to unmute themselves when it was appropriate for them to speak.
We can certainly do that this meeting. Let me change that setting. I'm still going to ask that everybody raise your hand and wait to be called on before being unmuted, just because there is like the possibility of a lot of crosstalk when we've got 20 people on here. But we can definitely allow participants to unmute. So let me just do that. All right. And Michael O'Brien?
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, I had trouble logging in with my computer, but I'm on my phone at the moment.
Wonderful. Can you see everybody or?
I can see you, Kim.
If you swipe right and left, you'll be able to see more people. But and then I think Officer Nunn just joined us as well. Officer Nunn, are you here?
Yes, I am.
Thank you. And then John Gerhardt is taking a brief leave of absence from the group, but he will be joining us again later. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Chief McAlpine to give us an update on the officer-involved shooting.
The update is there is no update. And it's really is just acknowledging once again people's frustration for wanting information and they want it now. And just reminding everybody that we don't control this investigation. It is with the Washington Major Crimes Unit and then to the DA's office. And it's my understanding that Major Crimes Unit is still compiling their reports, getting all the transcriptions from all the interviews, and still, compiling their case file to go to the DA. So at this point, I have no update other than to, I would just acknowledge from some of the social media that the perception is that we are hiding things and they want, videos released and everything else. And it's just a reminder that there's an outside entity that's investigating this and they control all the information, which includes evidence, testimony, things of that nature. And when they're done, we will hear from the DA himself. So that part of the update is there is really nothing new other than it's proceeding. I've been told that the toxicology report can take several months because the crime lab is so backed up. And in previous ones, the DA has said they're months behind. And I do not know whether or not they'll wait for that report. But that's one that could take a while if that's part of his decision-making factor. So that is the update as I have it. And then I just have, if there's no questions from the board on that, I'll just go into one other presentation. Okay, the other one is the one information, as you know, that I can control is the events that happen the following day, which is the unlawful assembly / riot, and just updating this board. So what we have done is last week we presented to the council on a timeline in the events from the time we knew it to the event that occurred and shortly thereafter. We also presented last week to the Committee for Community Engagement. And we again presented at the CPO4B, that's a community group in the Bull Mountain area. And then this week, we'll also present to CPO4M, which is the Metzger area. And so we are on the areas of when it concerns the riot, we do have all that information and we do share that with our community. And then the last one I was asked to kind of explain, you're going to hear it probably multiple times during our time to include in the orientation. I think you saw it in our packet. I'm going to go off camera to pull up a document here, but it really is how we set the tone, as you can imagine. So when I hire people on, they get a letter of expectations, and part of it, I'll actually send you guys a copy for your packet so you see it in its entirety because it's a memo. But in that, as you saw, not only our vision and mission, but what our core values are. And it's easy to remember, it's A-list: attitude, leadership, integrity, service, and teamwork. And that really is the North Star that we do everything by, or try to, with starting with not only our culture, but who we onboard. So I try to put some words to this because a lot of times attitude, all these words can be somewhat ambiguous. For example, attitude is we aspire to maintain a positive attitude and exhibit a can-do attitude as we perform our responsibilities and interact with each other and the community we serve. In leadership, every member of the department is a leader, and although responsibilities vary, accountability remains constant. The principles of leadership and the value of accountability are inseparable. As leaders, we are accountable for our own actions, those of our subordinates, and to the community we serve. For our integrity, we act with integrity. Acting honorably is the foundation of everything we do and the basis of public trust. We earn credibility by doing the right thing, being open and honest, and actively living our core values. For service is service to our community. We are dedicated to the idea of providing the highest quality of professional law enforcement service to our community. We strive to be proactive, trusted partner with our community with the goal of enhancing the quality of life to our community. And then teamwork. Teamwork for the common good. We understand the strength of cooperation and collaboration, and that our success depends on our ability to perform together as one cohesive team. We are dedicated to creating a positive environment which fosters camaraderie for the common good. And I'll lower my screen to get back on. What's important there, and it's in the memo, is I do not ask of anybody what I don't ask of myself. So I have to lead first in all of those categories and leading that expectations. I try and live that every day. So these are posted in the walls of our building. Again, I republish them with maybe some tweaks every year to keep it fresh and remind people of what we're here to do. And again, I think as I heard somebody describe it as, it is our North Star. So again, you're going to hear this woven in from time to time, and these are what I hope to be held accountable to. And when we falter, and I will tell you, when I've had to issue discipline and or termination, I have put those core values in there. And if the person I believe did not live up to those are memorialized in that document as well. Not only maybe the policy they violated, but also if they violated our core values. So again, just wanted to share that with you. We'll do that in the orientation and anywhere else that it seems appropriate as we move along. So thank you everyone for that.
Thank you, Chief. Does anyone have any questions or comments? Okay, moving on. We did open up for public comment or put out a notice of public comment asking if anybody would like to speak during the first 10-15 minutes of our meeting. This week, we did not receive any requests to speak to the board. We did receive 3 emails or messages through the form. 2 of them you received. The 3rd one came in late this afternoon. You'll get it after the meeting. Something that we will be working through in the work plan is how you as the board would like to respond. If you would like to respond, how you would like to respond to questions and comments that come in through public comment and what your process is going to be. But before then, does anyone have any comments? Or if you had the chance to read the public comment that was sent to you this afternoon? Yes, Liz?
Yeah, I just want to make sure as we look at these comments, I noticed on one of them, they had a question about body cams. Make sure we're tracking somehow so that at the appropriate time, we bring these back around. And I also think it would be important to make sure that those are posted on our website so people can look at them. But I don't know who's going to be integrating, maybe it's Eduardo, but making sure we get back to the topics if they've raised an issue that is one of the items on our work plan. So I would just suggest that. Thanks.
Thank you. And Eduardo, please confirm you are going to post the public comments to the website?
Yes, the public comments will be posted again, and for anyone watching in the public, the link is tigard-or.gov/PSAB. And they can also leave a public comment there.
Great, thank you. And Danny, I see your hand up.
Just wanted to clarify, you said that you sent these comments to us?
Yeah, you should have received a PDF document probably around 3 p.m. or so.
No, I haven't gotten it. It looks like I'm nodding heads.
Okay, we're trying to use a new distribution list. So Eduardo, I guess that did not get sent probably to anybody who's external to the city. Can you check with IT about that? And I will send all 3 of the comments to folks after the meeting today.
Yes, I can do that.
Thank you. Okay, so there is some public comments. They did come in. They're in written form. They will be sent to you after this meeting. Going forward, you will receive them before the meetings, and we will discuss in the work plan how and when you would like to address them. As for tonight's meeting, we had talked about going through that topic schedule. Everyone was going to review it this week. One thing I would like to see if this would make sense as a goal for this evening is that we finish the discussion around the topic schedule and have that set and then move into the work plan next week. Does that sound like a reasonable goal for this evening? Yep. Okay, great. So I'm going to share my screen. So this is the few slides that we went through last week. I'm just going to go through it real quick again and then pull up the Word document that everybody should have received this week that goes through all of the topics, and we will work through it on the Word document. So we're tracking the changes as we discuss them. So going forward, here's the topic schedule. It is divided right now into these 5 units, including this introductions section, which is where we currently are as we discuss the work plan and the topic schedule. Then moving and included the public meeting law overview that we did with Shelby in the first week, reviewing the work plan, topic schedule, mission, vision, values for this group, and then going into a Tiger Policing 101 and an early action on body cams. And Scheherazade, yes.
Hi, I was just going to ask if we could have someone read aloud the comments that were sent, since I think most of us didn't get to read them beforehand. Since they were submitted for this meeting, it seems fair that they get space in this meeting. I don't know.
Of course. Can I see a show of hands? Would everybody like to hear them read out loud? Yep. All right, so let me stop this. And I'll pull up the meeting or the.
Thanks for suggesting that.
That's a great suggestion. So I'm going to pull up the comments as I also read them. So we had comment number 1 was received yesterday. It was an email from Ben Douglas Crombie, who is currently active duty military stationed at Camp Pendleton, California. The subject line read, public comment on Jacob McDuff shooting for PSAB. He starts, good evening. I normally do not comment in an official setting like this, but recent events have made it so that I have questions I'd like the Public Safety Advisory Board to address with the Tigard Police Department. The conspicuous lack of information released regarding the Jacob McDuff shooting, along with focus on the resulting protest and the narrative of the victim's roommate conflicting with official statements, gives the impression of a deliberate cover-up. If the city has nothing to hide, if the officer involved did nothing wrong, why have we not seen any hard evidence? I'm a lifelong Tigard resident, currently serving in the U.S. Navy and planning on returning when my contract is over. It is my home. If we don't learn from horrific incidents like the death of Jacob McDuff, how are we supposed to heal? Secondary to my first question is the idea of body cams. I would like to know Chief McAlpine's thoughts on implementing body cams on every officer, as well as improved training. As someone familiar with the use of lethal force and proper escalation to it, Officer Maldonado firing 10 rounds into a parked car at an unarmed man seems like either poor training or panic. Either deficiency needs to be corrected in every other Tigard police officer to prevent more senseless death. Thank you for your time. First comment. Our second comment was from today. It was an email from Michael Antonelli, who lives in Tigard, Oregon. The subject line read, PSAB comment. Number 1, I would like to see a more comprehensive approach to public safety by the board in its workplay. So far, it seems somewhat confined to the police only. Public safety organizations include law enforcement, fire and emergency medical services, disaster planning, etc. The public safety issues that a municipality might grapple with include narcotic use, trespassing, burglary, harassment, juvenile delinquency, unauthorized living, noise, littering, inappropriate social behavior, inebriation, and other quality of life issues. Generally, organizations are involved in the prevention of and protection from events that can endanger the safety of the general public from significant danger, injury, or property damage, such as crimes or disasters, natural or man-made. Number 2, I would encourage the members to refrain from personal opinion comments on the officer-involved shooting until the investigation reports out. Last meeting, there seemed to be one member who seemed to express her personal opinion. And there was a third one. I'm going to stop sharing my screen. It came in later, so it's not formatted. The last comment came from Holly Mentezana, also a Tigard resident. There is no subject, and the text reads, what are you going to do to ensure that another citizen in a mental health crisis won't be killed by police? What accountability are the police going to take, and what will you do to ensure the smear campaign that was held against Mr. McDuff will be changed and give citizens factual information about his mental state and not being violent? And that is the end of the third comment. I will make the note as well, in the second comment, there are several links to Wikipedia articles for those topic areas. Valerie. Valerie, you're still muted.
Sorry, after that whole thing. No, I put a link in the chat to the Wikipedia definition of public security, which is where I think a large part of that second comment came from. But, you know, I think it is the comment that people are not to have opinions in this group, I think is something that is common. But I think a lot of us have been selected to participate in this group because we do have different backgrounds and different perspectives. And so, you know, I want to make sure that people understand that, you know, we bring our experiences and our perspectives to this. And our goal is to try and use those to make Tigard a better place. So, you know, I think the comment that they may be referring to is the comment Shahrazad made in the last session, which I thought was useful. You know, I don't know that I don't entirely share that perspective, but I haven't had her experiences. So, you know, I think I want to make a statement about that because I think it is productive for people to be able to share their different perspectives in coming to this board, and that we try and have a good, well-intentioned civil discussion about this. So I understand where people may come from, this idea that we should be completely impartial, but I don't think that's realistic or why we're here.
Yeah, and Scheherazade.
Yeah, I'm also pretty sure that's about me. I'm a mentally ill person. That's always going to impact my life and the way that I see these things. I take issue with what happened, and that's the exact reason that I wanted to be on this board, was to prevent that sort of thing. So I think if I sat here and didn't mention that, then I would be failing in the role that I took on as a representative of the people of Tigard. And that's my take on that.
Thank you for sharing. Are there any other comments on the public comment we received this evening? Jeff.
I was waiting for the unmute. I think what I realized 2 weeks ago is, for me at least, it's really hard to hold separate truths all together. You know, my truth one for me, my experience and my neighbor's experience with police. Also, you know, the history of where policing comes from, why it was created in the first place, where it has gone throughout the arc of our country. And also more recent truth with what happened here. And then the 3 officers in our group that were very emotional, and just seeing people as human and holding all those together at the same time was really difficult. So I just wanted to acknowledge that. Also, I had to run out to help my kids making the spaghetti. So I might have missed something, but I hope we'll be able to talk about body cameras in Unit 1 when we start through the process. It might be worth talking through a procedure for releasing video, at least to the family or the family's lawyer, and a specific timeline that might be appropriate. I don't know the nuances of how investigations work, but I think the lack of a timeline and the lack of the consistent information coming out is probably contributing to the angst from the public.
Yeah, thank you, Jeff. Valerie?
Sorry, I just had one additional thought. Is it possible for this group, just knowing how important this particular investigation is to our community and to the people that we're representing, to request that the state lab and that Washington County Major Crimes prioritize this? Because I think that's what I'm hearing from some of those comments, is that, you know, of course, as Chief McAlpine said, they were, you know, everybody wants their information yesterday, right? And we know that's not realistic. But I do think that it is possible for us as a group to request that Major Crimes prioritize this, and just to emphasize that we believe this to be very important for our community.
And Chief, I want to call on you both to respond to what Valerie just brought up, as well as I saw your hand was up.
Kim, who did you say? You cut
Chief.
out.
Chief,
thank
sorry.
you. Okay. No worries. First, go back to a couple of comments before, and I cannot reassure all of you enough that we're not here. You weren't assembled for like-mindedness.
Right.
We're here because you have concerns, you have passion, you have lived experiences. You want to be part of a solution or molding the Tigard Police Department. And those dialogues are going to be uncomfortable at times, and there's going to be different viewpoints. And I just hope none of you feel quieted down or the pressure. I definitely want to hear your lived experience, no matter how uncomfortable or how much I might not like it, or I don't even think that's the right terminology. But those have to be discussed. So I just really want to put my support towards that. As far as, I talked to Kim a little bit as far as how do we handle these public comments. And as you guys talk about, the structure is, some of them can be quick answers. Some of them may be thoughtful if they have to come from us, but it's the board's work. And how does that look like? And then is there something that you need from the Tigard Police Department to respond or answer to the board on any questions they have? So I know we'll still try and figure out that as well, just kind of the nuances to that. As far as, requesting on the body cameras, it's evidence that was taken by those investigators. Tigard Police Department doesn't have them. They're not in our possession. They are evidence taken by them. And so again, there's already public disclosure requests out there. And so the investigation continues. What the work of the board might be is, after you go through this process, is can you advocate for a different process? And that's being done at the state level, but also, in the Washington County level from the 2007 agreement from Senate Bill 111. So those are things that are all within your areas to look at.
Yeah, and just to add to that, you'll even see this in the topic schedule itself. It talks about areas where the change can be made at the city level, change needs to be made at the state level, so we can ask the city to advocate for that change, and some change that needs to happen at the federal level, depending on the issue. Myself, along with Shelby, will try to be very clear about what the board and what the city or state or federal rules and regulations are, depending on what that action level or what that topic is. And Jimmy Brown.
Okay. As I have sat here now and listened to this whole issue and listened to the comments, I feel as though one of the central themes that comes through is an issue about trust, or the lack of trust that is seen going toward the city and toward Tigard PD.
Jimmy, I'm sorry to interrupt. Would you mind being a little closer to your microphone? It's difficult to hear you.
Okay, how's that?
Thank you. Much better.
All right. And so I think that part of the issue is this what appears to be a lack of trust between folks who are speaking in the community and folks who are writing comments. And when I see that, I look at partnership arrangements that are occurring between Washington County Major Crimes, Washington County DA, Tigard Police, and the City Council. And so I would ask that perhaps, Chief, one of the things to do is to ask Washington County DA to stop the city and the Tigard Police Department from taking the full hits of this from a public perspective, and sit down and explain to the community, either through a Zoom meeting or through a news conference, what these kinds of processes are and why these processes take so long. It's the lack of information that allows people to essentially make an assumption on why no information is forthcoming. I've sat through these kinds of situations before, and I understand from the community's perspective why there's this sense of they must be stonewalling, they must be hiding something because they're giving us no information. And the only person coming out to give the information continues to be the chief. So I think in any healthy partnership, one would look to their partners and say, you have words that can bring some type of solace to community at large. And by providing them some insight into this process, not only will help this particular incident, but any future incident. And then, let's see. Oh, and so, again, Chief, I would ask that perhaps you connect with the district attorney. Certainly some time has gone by now. We as a committee, we certainly understand what you said in terms of the DA is not releasing any information at this point in time, but again, from how do we improve and promote transparency, bring the district attorney face into the process.
And just a quick follow-up question that, Chief, when you've been going out and talking to the community, has the Washington County DA been with you on those?
No.
Okay.
And, in all fairness to DA Barton, we've had many questions. I brought him in to speak directly to the city manager and to the mayor so that they could hear exactly what the process is, Senate Bill 111, what he does. And he did that. He did that very quickly and had a Teams meeting on that. And he has offered it up to wherever. And what I will do is reach out to him and see if there is something that he can do, explain, or I might invite him to a meeting here. But again, into the larger audience. So all of those are good suggestions. And I believe he would accommodate us.
Thank you, Chief. Liz Newton?
Thank you. We've moved along a little on the discussion, but I wanted to reinforce what the chief said about, for me, the reason you are all here is because when we reviewed your applications on council, you were very forthcoming about your lived experience and the perspectives you could bring. And this is what meeting number 3 or meeting number 4. And I continue to be impressed by the grace with which you're willing to share. And so I encourage you, as somebody whose big interest in life is community engagement, not to hold back and to share your perspectives, because as somebody said a few minutes ago, that is what's going to make our community better. So I want to encourage that in all of you and reiterate that you were all selected because of what you shared in your applications and your backgrounds and your willingness to share your thoughts. So thank you for that, and keep doing it. Thanks.
And Scheherazade, I think you will close out our discussion.
Yeah, I just want to say, like, from my perspective on the topic of trust in this case, I think part of the issue is that, no, I meant to unraise my hand. Okay, there we go. Part of the issue is that while, like I myself, I'm very understanding that these investigations take time, that, the information might not be disclosed, it kind of brings up this problem of, okay, when will we talk about it? Because we all know, a shooting happens, 3 months go by and everyone has forgotten about it. So if we have to wait until all this information is released, the officer's already back on the job, the life has been lost, all of this stuff has already happened. We have this information that I think a lot of people are really horrified by, and we're being told to just, hey, wait, wait and wait and wait and wait. And I think a lot of us know that if we wait, it will get forgotten and it won't be discussed and nothing will change, because that's the pattern that we've seen historically.
Okay.
I'm sorry, I just have to say something really quick, but that's why we have this board, is to make sure that the things that we need to pursue, we continue to pursue. So, quite frankly, as I said last meeting, anything's on the table, and, working together with, the chief and Commander McDonald, again, that's why we have this board, so we can talk about the things that we need to talk about in an environment where, we've got respect for each other and acknowledge different lived experiences and value what each of us have to say. So I will be quiet now.
Thank you for jumping in. I think that's a great segue to talking about the topic schedule and what we'll be discussing. And part of this and setting the schedule in advance is to give Commander McDonald and his team, who's putting together the training and education opportunities, some schedule and some idea of what's coming so they can start planning for 6 months, a year down the road. And have the speakers brought in that will have the best information, have presentations ready, be ready to talk to all of you and answer your questions. So there's the PowerPoint. So as we were discussing before we went to the public comment, which was, I think, a great discussion. We're on Unit 1, introductions. This will conclude with the body cams. We had discussed previously in the first meeting having a rotating chair and vice chair role. I think a perfect time for that would be having our first chair vice chair start just before we enter into the body cams discussion, and was to start talking through the topics after we have the work plan finalized. And then that would also be the chair vice chair that would move into Unit 2, at least hiring, and that would be the Tigard officer's journey in that unit, hiring, and then several topics around training, and then performance review and discipline. Just going to run through these very quickly right now, and then we'll go in detail in the Word document so we can make changes together. Unit 3 is the community experience. This is topics that revolve around officer appearance, traffic stops. There were a couple that came out of the City Council's document, several topics around use of force, and then some other public police interactions, including no-knock warrants and participation in the TriMet program. Unit 4 revolves around social justice, several issues around mental health, and the court system. And then the last unit, the Youth of Tigard, which includes school resource officers and a youth peer court program. And Officer McDonald talked a little bit last time about why that's at the end. It's because there's already some school resource officers changes that are happening at the school board level. And waiting to see kind of how that falls out before it makes sense for us to talk about it as a board. So I'm going to pull up the Word document, and I'd like if we could talk about Unit 1, maybe at the beginning, if there's any additions that you would like to make, any changes, but also open if there's some other area that makes more sense that you feel like we should be discussing. And Tammy is going to field hands and call on people for this. Tammy, are you unmuted? Are you calling on people?
Emilio.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was just going to ask if we're doing a chair and vice chair system. Is that something we're going to do at this meeting, or what's the plan?
We still have a couple of questions around how exactly that will work on the work plan. So I plan on having that conversation next meeting, unless there is an appetite to do it at this meeting. Okay, so we will have that at the next meeting. So we'll finish up the work plan, decide exactly how we're going to do chair and vice chair, and then nominate and hopefully choose our chair and vice chair, our first chair and vice chair at the next meeting. If that sounds good for everybody, you can use the thumbs up symbol or nod or shake your head or raise your hand if you'd like to make a change to that. Great. So I'm going to put this on track changes and going into this first topic schedule. We have Unit 1. Any changes that you would like to see during this beginning the process, in addition to the work plan, the topic schedule, Tiger Policing 101, and then body cams? Anything else you think that would be useful before moving into working on any topics that you feel is missing?
Jeff Mott has a suggestion.
Thanks. I think in addition to, cost and what body cams and vehicle cams look like now and how you would budget for putting body cams on the entire force, I think it'd be worth talking about the procedures for release, or at least establishing kind of the generic timeline around if these things need to be used for an investigation, how to work through disseminating that information to the public.
Okay. And Shelby, correct me if I am wrong, but I believe the procedures for the release of footage, timing, process, that would be a state action or a city action?
Correct. It's Oregon Public Records Law.
Okay.
I think you're on mute, Shelby.
And Michael?
Okay, I don't know if you can hear me. Is that possible right now?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, sorry about that. I'm having more technical problems than usual even, which is pretty impressive. I just want to add that I'm a member of the judges organization, and we're tracking some bills in the legislature that could be interesting enough to this group that we might want to impose them or insert them at the last minute as we go through the process. There's nothing really immediately coming through the pipeline, but there are some that bear watching that have to do with courts and with police and traffic stops and things like that, traffic fines. So I'll try to keep, pardon me, I'll try to keep the group advised of that. I just wanted to interject that.
And Justin had a comment.
Yes, thank you. Within Unit 1, I noticed that there's a Tigard Policing 101, which I anticipate we'll talk about how Tigard PD, goes about their day-to-day routines and functions as law enforcement within the city. I was also curious if in supplement to that portion, if we could have a part where we also discuss the concepts of how misdemeanors and violations work and how that's related to charges or arrests that Tigard Policing make. And the reason why I bring that up is because I've been recently listening to the Oregon Justice Resource Center's podcast, where they actually do a really wonderful breakdown of that. And I think that would be really beneficial to the Public Safety Advisory Board to listen or to learn about the differences and how police play a role in that, but also what that means in terms of where you go in courts, or if it's the county, or if it's a city issue.
And just to clarify, you're talking about how a person is charged, like what charges are brought against them?
Yes, and what the differences are between, say, a misdemeanor versus a violation. And then I think that would be great context for the work that we'll be discussing.
Yeah, and Shelby, can you clarify a little bit about how the police versus the DA might work on something like that? On those?
Sure, and that's actually Commander McDonald can weigh in too. So if it's the City of Tigard code that's being enforced, then it'll state in our code what the penalty is. If we're enforcing state law, then we have no say in that, and that'll be decided by the DA.
Okay. And Officer or Commander McDonald, would you be able to add a little bit on that, some more information into the Tiger Policing 101?
Yeah, I could do a breakdown that discusses really the differences between violations, misdemeanors, felonies, and kind of where those all fall and like what courts they would that those would be addressed in. So yeah, I could add something on that. You bet.
Thank you. Justin, does that meet what you were asking?
Absolutely. I think that'd be wonderful to hear from Commander McDonald, and just great for also the public who are watching to know about and understand.
Great. Thank you.
So Michael, is your hand up for a new comment or is it from before? Oops, I think you're on mute. No, he's saying no. So Jimmy Brown, you had a comment?
Yes, this actually goes back to the Policing 101. And it's the issue of officer discretion. My sense is, and my experience is that there are certain things that officers can do as they look at a particular situation happening in the community that may result in a street release, no action, holding off on some action, but allows their discretion to continue on in their enforcement action. And so if there's some discussion about that, what is it that allows an officer to decide, I'm going to let this person who jaywalked in front of me to go on with, a word of advice, or, is it a person's attitude? Is it a person's respect of the authority of the police officer? What is it that causes that particular discretion to go from point A to point Z? And again, I know it exists because I've seen it in action, but I think it's something that the general public certainly would like to see, and I think the members of this board might, along with the issues of misdemeanors and felonies and those kinds of offenses.
Yeah, and that's really interesting. I can see how that would definitely be something we should discuss. Something to think about as we talk about Tiger Policing 101 versus some of the other topics is that there will be an education component, presentations, speakers coming in for every one of these areas. And so the Tiger Policing 101 is to kind of set a foundation and then go deeper into some concepts maybe later on. So I think we will come back to, I think it'd be good to have an introduction to officer discretion during the Tiger Policing 101, but understand that we will definitely be coming back to that as a concept later on when we're talking about training and use of force and performance review and discipline and other topics. Does that make sense? Kind of how these are, how we're trying to have it so it builds instead of throwing a lot of information at everybody right at the beginning. All right. And John Trin, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you. And it might be in Unit 2, but it'd be great to be able to see in terms of job description for our law enforcement roles and responsibility. And then also some kind of explanation between the responsibility of the Tiger PD versus, let's say, the sheriff for Washington County. Who has what jurisdiction, who's going to be responding to what, that kind of stuff.
Thank you. I don't see any other hands about this Unit 1. So I'm going to move on to Unit 2, Tigard Officer's Journey. So we had this broken into 3 categories. First one being hiring, second one being training, and then performance review and discipline. And you'll see they're notated on the right-hand side if it is something that can be acted on at the city level, if it requires state action, or if it is federal. And any comments or changes, additions to Unit 2?
John, your hand's still up. Did you have a comment on this, or was this from the other unit?
Chief McAlpine has a comment.
Chief McAlpine, please.
Yeah, so my hand isn't, I can't find the hand raiser thing, whatever. So
let's jump in.
I apologize. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay. It was just, again, you kind of alluded to it, Kim, but again, for structure, the 101 was intended really is just to say, this is how many officers we have, this is the divisions, this is the layout. And it was intended to be 20 minutes, very brief and that's why we called it 101. It's just, if you didn't even know what kind of roles that we do, traffic versus patrol versus transit, so that we could, bulk of that week or that night was going to be on body cameras and a lot of going over that. So you had a really in-depth. And so if we are hearing from you, if we could kind of take the main topics and behind the scenes between Commander McDonald and I and figure out where that best speaks to. And again, we might be able to touch a bullet point or two overall, but we can definitely embed it. But I just wanted to let you know, structurally, we had about 20 minutes and then we were really going to go into body cameras for most of the meeting.
Thank you, Chief. And I think, yeah, I think that's kind of how this makes sense, would be to take some of these concepts and do just a quick bullet point or two on them here and then go into more detail as they come up throughout the process. And Jimmy Brown.
So we're moving into the Tigard officer's journey, correct?
Yes, please. Yes.
Okay, so if we could, in the section that says identify how biases are identified in the hiring process, could we call out the issue of the use of psych evals? And also, what type of social media review does the city utilize in the hiring process? I bring that up because given what has been happening since January 6th, we're finding a number of, I'm not saying how many, but there have been recognition that members of law enforcement from across the country, both retired and active, have participated in the January 6th insurrection. And so they have outed themselves, obviously, through social media, which leads me to say, how much review does our department, how much do we utilize social media review to take a look at those individuals that are interested in becoming members of Tigard's police force? And then I think along with that, is there a social media policy that the department utilizes that officers are aware of, or they agree to, or whatever? And yes, I know this leads to discussions about freedom of speech and censorship, et cetera, but you know, these are some important topics in the time.
Yeah, thank you, Jimmy. I've added those to the topic schedule. And Justin.
Under training, in addition to de-escalation training, specifically, I'd like to learn about what the mental health response training is involved in, and I know that would fall under de-escalation training. And for my second point, I don't know if this belongs in another portion, but I'm curious as to what sort of community relationship building and community relationship to police department bonds exist, and if that's a part of an officer's experience.
Thank you, Justin. I've added that under the other police public interactions. I hope that's okay.
And we have Jeff next.
Thanks. under the hiring, kind of to tag on to Jimmy's comment, how we review past misconduct in prior roles, if that, if that exists, what procedure is in place for that. And then to tag on to Justin's comment around de-escalation training, I remember reading the police force memo over the summer, and the basic discussion was around no set skill or package of learned responses can be called de-escalation, but then later in the memo, verbal and physical control tactics, firearms use, taser use can lead to de-escalation. So it was more centered around, imposing and physical de-escalation versus verbal. And I guess in what my mind equates to calming the situation. So I'd love to kind of separate those two in the de-escalation training somehow.
So de-escalation training separated between physical de-escalation and verbal de-escalation. Is that correct?
Yes, and then I guess I don't know how to put it succinctly, but in the police force memo, de-escalation equated to controlling and kind of subduing the whoever the police is interacting with versus calming the situation. That's how I read the police force memo this summer.
We next have Abdi had a comment.
I think John has had his hand up for a little bit. I just wanted to make sure. Do you want to go first, John?
Yeah, I appreciate it. Thank you. I guess for me in training, I know that police officers probably have lots of different training, and it's called out in terms of de-escalation. And I think it'd be nice to be able to call out crisis intervention, CTI training that the police officer has to go through.
And this CTI crisis?
Crisis, is that in? Maybe Commander McDonald.
CIT, crisis intervention training.
Okay. Yes, thank you.
Thank you. And Abdi, did you have a comment as well?
I just wanted to add, and especially on the de-escalation training, do you have by any chance have a different set of rules for, like, I wouldn't say specifically the person you encounter, but like younger, like if you have youth compared to an adult, are you gonna have different de-escalation training between that? Or like if it's an older person compared to, like a super, like I was asking, do you guys have different sets of like de-escalation training for like age groups in a way, or like genders in a specific way or no?
Chief, could you answer that question?
Yeah, we'll incorporate that in there so that whatever we consider, in other words, I think I hear, Abdi, what you're asking for is just, do we have a set, obviously if you're talking to a young teenager versus, maybe an older adult, who knows, with dementia or anything else. So yeah, we'll cover all that in what we currently have. And I think you'll see where we're lacking in areas.
Excellent. Lower hand there. Okay, so I've heard additions for hiring and training, no additions for performance review and discipline. Did anyone have any questions around that area, or did this cover everything you're looking for? All right, I don't see any hands. So I'm going to move into Unit 3, the community experience. This covered all activities where the police and the public could be interacting, including officer appearance, a couple topics around traffic stops, use of force, and other police-public interactions. I think with the previous section, it kind of made sense the way it was ordered between hiring and then training and then performance review and discipline. In this area, the order between these four areas is a little more arbitrary. So if you have a request for something to be moved, please make it. Valerie.
I understand the value in going over this just so we know where we're going and so that people can appropriately plan. I don't want us to get too far out though, just because I think that, questions may come up as we're going through that, may require adding topics as to the list of topics that we have here. So just want to make sure that we all agree that there's some flexibility to what the schedule is going to look like, as long as we make sure that we're respectful of the people who will be presenting and that we give them enough time to do so.
Yes, and I think the chief will echo me and probably say the same thing in a second. As far as the list goes, this is so we can give people as much time for planning and as we can, but there is flexibility if there's something you need more of. If there's something after we cover a topic and you realize that we needed to have also covered X, Y, or Z, then that is also something that we are able to do.
Great, thank you.
And Chief?
Also we understand some people just process as opposed to looking at this. So the other thing I would offer up is you look at this list and start thinking about some questions or areas you want to talk about. If you just write them down in here and send them to Kim and Eduardo, we can, even if it's a couple meetings down the road, we can anticipate some of the things that you're interested in and make sure that we cover it in the area that we're going to. So just want to offer up that in a written form as well.
Yeah, and this is your board. These are your topics. This is what you're discussing. After these next 2 meetings where we finish the topic schedule and the work plan, I will be doing much less talking. I think everyone's going to be happy. Justin, yes.
Yes, thank you. Under other police public interactions, I know that this topic would not be as intense or as pressing as some of the other things that we're working on, but as it relates to community interactions, I'm curious about either the data or maybe a report from the police department on issues that would be considered maybe nuisance interactions, such as noise complaints, trespassing, loitering, things where there's not an aggressive or maybe violent interaction, but rather reporting to something that might be considered a violation or, again, a nuisance.
Okay.
Yeah, we call those quality of life crimes. So definitely know what you're talking about.
I like that term, quality of life.
Great. And Jeff.
Yes, the tag. I'm just going to follow Justin from now on, I think, because I'll tag on with that around interaction data. I talked with the chief a couple weeks ago around monthly dashboard reports. So thanks again for that conversation. There is a lot of great information out there and available publicly. I think there are ways to improve that by getting a little more granular and cataloging different types of crimes, different, ethnicity, gender, whether or not it's a mental health situation, just kind of getting more specific. So you can figure out where we're doing things right and where we have more room for improvement.
Awesome. And just to be clear, you're talking about looking at the current data that the police has and suggesting alternative metrics and things that they can be measuring.
Exactly. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
So-
and yep.
I was going to say, we also have some comments in the chat about use of force from Jimmy. And maybe if you want to chime in a little bit, he's had some comments in there for a bit.
Yeah. Jimmy, if you'd like to say anything.
Oh, me?
Yes, the chat is the public record, and I will go through it later, but it's difficult right now to do both.
I'm sorry. This is just part again of the use of force discussion that will be coming up. Obviously, we're talking about use of chokeholds and force continuums. Given the history, the most recent history with the riot that was called unlawful assembly that was called at the police station, and I can't remember if chemical agents were used. Is there a policy in place? And if so, how does the use of that type of agent get brought into use? So perhaps maybe Chief, you could give us some insight into that. I know our neighbors to the north have gone to court to stop the use of such tools as part of crowd control. So any discussion about that could certainly.
Would it be fair to topic that as policies around crowd and riot control, including the use of chemical agents?
Yeah, I'm comfortable with that.
Thank you. And Scheherazade.
I was actually just going to mention what Jimmy was talking about and say that I would like to extend it to all of the policies about crowd and riot control, but you did that. So yeah, okay.
All right. I'm glad we're thinking the same way. Bodes well. And Jeff. Jeff, did you have an additional question, or was your hand still up?
Sorry, I didn't unmute myself.
Oh.
Having trouble. Under the traffic stops section, maybe if we could specifically discuss unarmed traffic patrol and unarmed transit police, just to make sure we specifically talk about that.
Unarmed traffic control, and then unarmed. Would that be part of the TriMet police program?
Yes, it might be.
If you're talking about unarmed, Jeff, you're talking about a whole new concept. Are you talking about the concept of an unarmed patrol and unarmed traffic?
Yeah, I think we'd have to figure it out once we get through the other sections. But yeah, the concept or the possibility, or I think just having that as a specific bullet might create good discussion.
All right, Kim, I would put it up there then, because transit police is totally different program and everything else.
So I thought I heard two. It was both around unarmed traffic control and then also unarmed transit police.
I think there's a bullet somewhere around partnering with TriMet. So maybe the transit police comment could go there. I can't find it looking at the work plan.
Yeah, I have it. It's under other public police interaction.
Oh, yeah.
So
Okay.
I included unarmed transit control there, and then unarmed traffic control under traffic stops.
Thank you.
And Scheherazade.
So under use of force, I know that there's the discussion of a force continuum. It's been a while since I read about the force continuum, and I guess what it's half question, half suggestion. The question is there a procedure of steps that an officer is supposed to take before unholstering their weapon? Is that kind of part of the force continuum topic? If not, can we have a discussion about that in another bullet point?
It's right in with the force continuum versus necessary and reasonable. So we'll walk you through both of those concepts.
Okay. Okay, cool.
Thank you, Chief, and thank you, Scheherazade. John.
Yes, I know that the Tiger PD also have a canine unit. That'd be great to understand what that unit, what it does. We also talk about in terms of, I think the chief talked about, she does a lot of public advocacy now, but also training. So what kind of involvement has the police department are involved in terms of those talks within the community? And then the other one that I didn't see on the list was really regarding in terms of the layout of the police department and how does where's the holding looks like, what the cell looks like. So when we look in terms of from a mental health perspective, how can we reduce some of those trauma that a person experienced going through the police department?
So the police department does it have a jail, or do you just have holding cells within the
holding facilities? Yeah, and so in an ideal world, you would have a tour of our whole facilities to see it, but And I don't know, Commander McDonald, if you want to say during the 101, if you're going to have pictures, but we may at least have pictures, and down the road, maybe after that, you can give us feedback where you want a kind of a virtual tour video or something like that. So we can do it any number of ways, whatever your preference is.
Okay. Thank you, Chief. And Danny.
Yeah, I'm not sure where this would go, and maybe it's embedded in one of these categories, but this something I don't see is highlighted is how the Tigard PD collaborates or doesn't collaborate with immigration or ICE. That's the one thing that I haven't seen. Though in conversations with Kathy, with Chief, I know that that's a topic that she's open to discussing. And then I know that.
Sorry, would you call that maybe a social justice topic that would fall into Unit 4?
I mean, it could go into community interactions as well, but yeah, social justice is fine.
Okay. Thank you.
And then this might be under Tigard Policing 101, where you describe how the Tigard PD is structured and the different units. I'm very interested in learning more about how local PD works on the issue of human trafficking, and who's the point person on that, or is there a committee or group around that, and what that work looks like.
Interesting. I'm going to group that under maybe other police public interactions, unless you think it belongs somewhere else.
We're going to cover that in orientation to show all the task force. And so perhaps after we do the orientation, if anything in that orientation, you guys feel like, oh, we want to know more about that group or what you do with that, or you collaborate with the federal government on this, that might be the best way. So in the 101, we're going to tell you all the things that we do and participate or partnership with, and maybe that'll spur some other requests.
And just back to Valerie's point earlier, this is iterative. This is not the final topic list, and we're never going to talk about anything else. So as you learn, as you hear about things, as you want to learn more, please feel free to bring them up and add them to the topic list. And Jimmy Brown.
Yes, thank you. Chief, thanks for bringing that piece up about the partnerships that you were engaged in, because I wanted to know if Tigard was involved in any type of federal policing task force that operates in the region. This next piece, though, relates to the TriMet activity, and I think it's just more of a general question. Perhaps you can answer this. The TriMet police that Tigard participates in, that's actually paid by TriMet. That's not a general fund obligation for our department. And so if those officers, who I'm assuming are hired Tigard police but paid through TriMet, if Tigard's not a part of that, would those officers come back into the general patrol force, or would they just disappear?
It depends on if we have vacancies. So in the orientation, Jimmy, we will talk about, because we've participated with TriMet for 10 plus years. So we'll talk about what that looks like. All of them have been brought back right now, because of our staffing levels and plus the uncertainty of TriMet under new leadership. We're just waiting for them to figure it out. So we are no longer in it as of December 31st. But it would be perfect for us to, we'll explain it in the orientation. And then if you guys choose to want to know more about that perhaps your recommendations might be not to, or, the benefits, pros and cons from this community, we can definitely do that in another discussion.
Great. Thank you. And Danny.
Yeah, I just wanted to follow up on my earlier comment around immigration related issues. And I think where you put that first comment in social justice, it works. And I guess where my mind was thinking in terms of the community interactions was, there's been cases that you see here and there about, police officers or TriMet officers or just public transportation across the country asking individuals about their documentation or their papers. So something around that.
Yeah, we put it under immigration, the police department and immigration, and that covers all the laws in the state and what we do or don't do. And I've gone to many different groups to, especially our Latinx population, to talk about that. So definitely that's very appropriate, and we have talking points on that.
Great. Thank you, Danny and Chief, and it is added under public police interactions. And Abdi.
I want to speak on real quick the consequences for a 9/11 call and to report if it's particularly on race, especially if it's a youth call. Should there be a different set of punishment? Should there be a little bit more of a a mental health aspect of it? It's that one in particular, because that's one of the things that do probably traumatize younger individuals. So I could see that being a conversation that we could have on whether, like, first the consequence should be heavier if it's a younger person, or should there be should be referred to a mental health professional or referred to somebody that they could speak to about the situation, exactly what happened with that youth individual.
So including a discussion around if youth or other factors may have gone into place in the call, may have been a factor in place in the call.
I was saying, so for example, like, let's say, if it were a situation like me, like someone called the police on me for doing nothing, like that situation would be, a traumatizing situation. So like let's say if it's even younger than me, like a 14-year-old kid, you need to get that 14-year-old Black kid the necessary resources to actually, you can't just let them, you can't just say, oh, okay, sorry that this person called the police on you. You have to actually provide that person with the resources, like talk to their parents, something at least to make the situation not oh, I'm sorry that happened to you.
And how to de-traumatize the situation, really, then.
Yes.
So I think we have to include, Kim, in there, basically the broader topic of our relationship with WACA, the Washington County Communications Center. That's where all the 911 calls go into for the whole county. And so understanding that it's not Tigard personnel taking those calls. And so we can talk, do an introduction in the overview of how that even looks currently.
And that, was that an acronym, WACA?
WCCCA, 3 C's.
Gotcha, thank you. And Valerie.
So, I know that for a lot of the folks that we represent, dealing with the homeless issues have been a real challenge. I know that's an issue that the police are often called to be sort of the first responder on, that may or may not. I don't know, there's some real unique challenges with homelessness, and particularly when we're talking about suburban homelessness, because people are fleeing the urban areas. And I would just, when we talk about that in the social justice unit, it would be helpful, I think, to have folks in our local community who address that and talk about, what are the interactions between first responders and those nonprofit organizations. We've talked about intergovernmental discussions, but I think, here's another opportunity to talk about what tools are there out there and how can we better utilize those.
So not just interactions between Tigard PD and other government agencies, but interaction between Tigard PD and nonprofits providing services in the community.
Yeah, and I think about this because, we've got the new homeless services tax that's going into effect for the metro region. And, I'm curious about what that spend looks like in our community with respect to public safety issues.
And what was that, Bill? What is the terminology for it again?
What do you mean, a bill?
The tax.
Oh, it's the metro. The metro organization has a supportive homeless services tax.
Homeless service. Thank you.
Yeah, that goes in. That actually went into effect on January 1. So.
Right. Okay. Thank you, Valerie. So I'm not hearing any more conversation about this Unit 3, the community experience. Had a few comments around social justice. Are there any other comments today around social justice topics that you'd like to hear more about or discuss?
There was one more comment in the chat about COVID-19 mandates and how Tigard PD is enforcing those.
Oh, interesting. Okay, I will add that. And Jeff, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you. I'm not sure where this would go. Maybe it's in the Tigard Policing 101, but how crime labs work, if they're part of kind of like Tigard PD or Washington County, or if they're controlled, run by a separate entity, civilian run.
Oregon State Police have the crime lab.
Okay.
And Scheherazade.
I was going to say, would it make more sense to, instead of having the COVID-19 mandate conversation under this topic, to move it earlier, since hopefully, fingers crossed, with the vaccine coming out, it won't be as much of a topic for discussion by the time that we get to Unit 3?
Yeah, that's a great point. There is also the option to rearrange Unit 3, or we can just move COVID-19 enforcement to just behind body cams and make it another early action.
Or if you want, I can do it in my chief's update. We do it because it's a pretty short explanation. So I can touch on it. And then if you guys have more questions or need more information, then we can expand on it. Would that be helpful?
I can't see everybody's faces. I'm sorry when I'm sharing the screen like this.
Yes, that would be good.
Thank you.
And then Justin had a comment.
Yes, under social justice, I was wondering if there would be space to then learn about from Tigard PD if they have statistics regarding race in relation to just the amount of stops, arrests, and interactions between community members and the police department.
We do, and it's on our transparency page. So we'll introduce you to that, and that is published information now.
Oh, great. Thank you very much.
We did add a topic around police interaction data review. So I'll just make a note that we are particularly interested in race data there as well.
Oh, that would be great. Thank you.
Yep. And any other topics around social justice that you can think of? Not that we move on from that. Okay, moving on to this last category, the Youth of Tigard. Right now there are two topics, one around school resource officers and the second around reestablishment of the Youth Peer Court program. Jeff.
I think as we're talking about mental health and in the intergovernmental collaboration and nonprofit collaboration, I think it's important to talk specifically around school wellness centers in conjunction with school resource officers, and how the whole all the organizations can work together to better the experience of students.
Great, thank you. And any other topics around the Youth of Tigard? Justin.
Continuing off with the conversation of SROs, specifically, I think this also relates back to a point that Jimmy had mentioned earlier. I'd like to know if there's discretion that SROs specifically use and what they are tasked with monitoring and will act on or stop a student on, and what they will not.
Great.
Abdi had a question or comment.
In particular to SROs, I know that I think our administration refers anything that they have to our SROs. So is that communication link, can we find by any chance? So could we like refine, not refine it, but like, is there a way that we could before, like, is there going to be data from that, what the administration is referring to the SROs about what they're doing to actual students in our schools?
And I think, Abdi, to your point, because I know you're part of it, and why we put it at the end, throughout that several month of getting information and what we had, what we didn't have, what the schools have and didn't have, all of those kind of things, like what is the school referring the SRO to, if it's discipline versus a crime. And hopefully by the time we point this out, we'll be giving you an overview as to moving it, reimagining what the SRO program, but we can do a historical and also let you know what changes were made through that work group.
And Abdi, if you want, you can look on the TTSD website. They actually had some of that data there talking about the referrals that that the administrators at the schools forwarded and what that looked like. So you can find that info there as well.
Awesome. And I did add the topic around information between the interaction between school administrators and the SROs. Hopefully we'll have more information. There'll be changes and we'll hear all about them when we get to Unit 5. Emilia?
Yeah, so this is something I meant to bring up earlier, but when peer court was a thing, it was like separate from TIAC. So I don't know if I would not say that the or delegation to the Tigard Youth Advisory Council would be something appropriate, since that delegation would probably not go to TIAC. But yeah, I just wanted to bring that up.
Okay. So good to know. I think it's something that, yeah, good to hear. And Abdi, you have another comment?
This one specifically around the like there's an emphasis on SROs, especially in the Youth of Tigard section, but I would say like SROs aren't really, the all-encompassing of the whole police department. So is there, something being set in place to actually like build that connection between just, our families, our youths, actually build that up with our whole police department and not just the SRO program?
So you call that like efforts to build connections between the police force and youth beyond the SRO program?
Yes, because a student can still get pulled over. It's not like you're not going to always see the SRO there.
Great, thank you. I don't see any other hands for adding to this. This will obviously not the last chance. Oh, Nick, Officer Nunn.
Just to go with that, efforts to build relationships between the Tigard Police and the Youth of Tigard. If you wanted to, we could talk about our cadet program, which is a youth program that focuses on 16 to 21-year-olds. That's just one of the programs we have.
Great. I added that to that conversation. Thank you for that. Wonderful. As long as there are no other comments, I will clean this up without all of the track changes and the formatting and resend it out to everybody. Oh, I do see a message in the chat. So I will clean up this and I will send it out to everybody. We do still have 25 minutes left in our meeting tonight. So I think it might be good to go back to the work plan and start working through that. I've got some slides that are built. We can talk about what we had already discussed, add any additional information, and be ready to go for next time. If we get far enough in the work plan, then we can also do Police 101, Tigard Police 101 next meeting, and get all set up to get into our early action topics. Does that sound good to everybody for tonight? Great.
Can I just ask a clarifying question?
Yes.
What do you mean when you say early actions?
There was the early action that is the body camera discussion.
Okay.
That is the only early action. So let me go back to sharing my screen.
Does that just mean like topics that we can make a decision on sooner rather than later?
It is. It was more like the topic that was just the first one that the city needed a quicker decision made because it affects the budget, and it isn't really in this process, but it's also something that is, I think, important to discuss, especially given the officer-involved shooting that just happened. So it's just this early action body cams. It'll also give us a chance to kind of test out the work plan on a topic and make any changes then afterwards that we might need to make before getting into some more of the topics. So just to review the work plan to date, we had discussed the board chairs, and in green is where you'll see the changes or decisions that were made by the board. So in this one, the board will elect a chair and vice chair at the onset of each subunit of topics, defining subunit by kind of those bold categories. In units 4 and 5, there are no subunits because there weren't as many topics there. So those will be treated as just one unit unless anybody would like to do differently. Great. The chair will have general directional. Danny, yes?
Sorry, you might have talked about this last meeting, but I had to leave early. I guess, was there any discussion around the process of electing chairs and co-chairs, or criteria that we're gonna use for that, or is that kind of to be determined?
That was exactly what I was about to ask for input on. So yeah, they'll have general directional power, service spokesperson. Generally, there are plenty of options for this, but I was thinking that it might make sense for people to nominate themselves as chair or vice chair, depending on how many folks there are, knowing that there are all of these subunits coming and we will be electing different chair and vice chair. Part of the discussion that happened in that first meeting was folks wanting to maybe position themselves as a chair or vice chair in a category where they feel they have some special knowledge, or they work in that area, etc. But we will ask for nominations for chair and vice chair, and then if there are more than 2 people who would like to be in that positions, then we will hold a vote. Unless you have and that is just a suggestion. This is your board. So unless someone has an alternate suggestion for how you would like to create your chair and vice chair positions. All right, I am not seeing any comments, so I'm going to go with, unless there is anything in the chat. No, so we will go with nominating chair and vice chair and then hosting a vote if there are more than 2 participants. You will able to self-nominate, and we will do that at the onset of each subunit.
Liz had a comment.
Oh, Liz.
Sorry, everybody who knows me will laugh, but we will get, if we're the chair and the vice chair, we'll get technical support, right?
Yes. Yes, so much technical support, you will not know what to do with it all. But yes, there will be there's a whole team of support staff, Tammy and I, as well as Eduardo, who is on the call. So you will have, and we already have a weekly meeting that we do to prep for these sessions. And so the chair and vice chair will try to accommodate your schedule and make sure that you can be at that to help set the agenda, and then you will be setting the meeting. Yep.
Okay, great. Thanks.
No problem.
Jeff also had a comment or question.
Yes.
Yeah, thank you. I think just clarifying questions. So subunit, does that mean like under unit 2, Tigard officers journey, there would be a chair and vice chair around hiring? Or is it? Yes, okay. And then second question, should we vote the 2 weeks prior, like at the end of a meeting, 2 weeks prior before we start the next unit, so the chair and sub chair have time to prepare whatever they need to prepare? Just the clarification on the word onset of each subunit.
We certainly can. If that makes sense to everybody, then we will do 2 weeks. If you can just nod, if that's what you would like. All right, so 2 weeks before we plan to move into the next topic area, we will hold nominations and a vote for the chair and vice chair for the next subunit. Thank you, Jeff. We also had discussed meetings, both the length and frequency. So going, as the last couple have been, they've been 90 to 120 minutes and bi-weekly. Does that still work for everybody? No changes? Okay. And then moving into roles and responsibilities. So this is pulled largely from City of Tigard. Has a charter for board. So some of this is pulled just directly from that charter, but please feel free to add, make any changes. But the roles and responsibilities as they're currently written are that you'll regularly attend meetings and contribute to the discussions, consider and discuss issues from a citywide perspective, as well as your own, using that lived experience. Strive to reach consensus on matters under consideration, so trying to achieve consensus, acting with respect and consideration for the viewpoints of others. This one is a legal requirement, shall not make representations on behalf of the City of Tigard or the board, whether intentional or not, without authorization of the board. So you'll see, in the earlier, we talked about the chair and vice chair acting as spokespeople for the board unless they delegate that out. So not being able, as a board member, you can make your own representations, but not representations on behalf of the city or the board without authorization. And then you will communicate the work of the board throughout your communities and any organizations that you participate in. And if there are any additions, I do see a comment in the chat from Danny asking about structure and process of the meetings, if there'll be large groups or time for small group discussion. Because these are public meetings, and Shelby, please jump in if I'm incorrect, we'll be having like all of our procedural discussions in the large group to preserve that public meeting law.
Yes, I think that makes sense. Once we get back to in-person meetings and we're not under the same governor's executive order for virtual meetings, we do have a little bit more flexibility. So we could do more breakouts if we're in person. But right now, the rules around virtual meetings are that they have to be available live to the public. And so that's why we have to stay in one group just for technology purposes.
Unfortunately, I know we had done the small groups as the icebreaker in that first meeting, and because we weren't discussing anything policy-wise, that was okay. But if we're having discussions, we need to be able to broadcast those.
Exactly.
But thank you for requesting that, because I understand the benefit of small group discussion. But yes, any additional roles and responsibilities for board members anyone would like to suggest? Valerie.
So it's not so much roles and responsibilities, but just on the second to the last bullet point, the without authorization language, You know, when I read that, I think that that the board would say, yes, you know, you should go and say this thing to city council or whomever. But so I don't know if we need to nail it down right now, but at some point, to the extent that representations are made by people who are on this meeting to people who are not on this meeting, then I think we should talk about what that looks like.
Could you elaborate? Like representations, like what type of representations?
Yeah, so for example, there's the early action item with respect to body cameras, right?
Yes.
And so we're going to have a discussion about that. And then presumably some representatives from this group will go and speak to the city council and present the recommendations of this group to the city council, you know, and so I would expect that coming out of the discussions that we have, we would either vote on or we would have some mechanism to authorize someone to take that action, right?
And yeah, exactly. And there's a portion in the work plan that is about how we come to those actions and what that interaction looks like. And then as far as it is currently written, although this is something that can be delegated, it is the chair and the vice chair who would act as the spokespeople for the group.
The particular unit or I mean, because I think when the work plan was drafted, the idea was that there were, you know, we would have a overall chair and vice chair. And one of the things that I thought was very creative was a suggestion early on that we would have, you know, unit chairs and sub chairs, right? Yes. And so you know, so I think we should just be clear when we're talking about what that authorization looks like, how that authorization is arrived at.
Okay, I understand. Thank you. Okay, moving on to roles and responsibilities. Now this is a continued section. Again, this is pulled from the Tigard Charter for groups, and there's a highlighted section. It's about attendance. So if a member is unable to attend a meeting, he or she is expected to notify the chair 1 week prior to the missed meeting. If a member has missed a number of allowable unexcused absences, regularly scheduled meetings within 1 year, the issue shall be forwarded to City Council for potential action. So as I understand, Shelby, please correct me, because City Council has put this board together, City Council is the only group that can change members of the board, but is there a expectation that you would like from this group for attendance and missing meetings or required attendance?
Yeah, so that's really a discussion for the board. I don't know off the top of my head what other boards in Tigard do in terms of what the numbers that they've set out. But yes, because the city council did name the members, to replace a member would require council action.
Thank you. So this would be about forwarding that to council for action. And Valerie.
So my suggestion would be not to have some hard and fast rule, because we don't know what's going to be people's individual circumstances. But I think that if they miss meetings such that they're not able to participate and contribute, then I think it's reasonable that there would be a process that someone would reach out to them and find out what's going on. You know, because for example, Mr. Gerhardt is taking a leave of absence, I assume career related, given what's in front of this group. But you know, I think that there are circumstances where it's reasonable for someone to step back, and there are circumstances where they just aren't making it a priority. And I think those are two different things. And that's why I think having a hard and fast number of allowable unexcused absences is kind of third grade, right? So I would suggest a reasonableness standard for that.
Do you have language you'd like to suggest?
I'm sure I could draft something.
I know, well, you're the lawyer, not me. And Liz, I see your hand.
Yeah, I was going to say, with my experience, my years of experience with working with city boards, generally people are missing meetings because they're at a point in their life where they just, you know, they're still committed, but they just need some time away. I only remember one time where it went to council, and that was because the individual was missing meetings and we couldn't get a hold of them to find out what was going on. We knew they were still in the community, but they just weren't responding. And so, you know, in my 37 years, that was the only time that happened. So for the most part, I support what Valerie's saying in terms of, you know, somebody reaching out to the individual and finding out what's going on, because generally, you know, people miss, you know, here and there, 1 or 2, and then they're back. And if there's an extended period, it's for some life circumstance. And so I would support something like that. So.
I'm happy to redraft this to include a reasonableness standard and instruction that the board will reach out to the member if that is broached. Everyone agrees, or if you have any other comment?
So Kim, this is Valerie again.
Yes.
I'm happy to send you some proposed language too.
If you would like, please do.
I'm not good at on the spot, so.
That is totally fine. Did not mean to put you on the spot. Thank you. And here's some notes on the organization of the board. There's not a specific discussion item, but we do have the work group, which is composed of the city manager, the police chief and designee, the Tigard Police educational consultant that they have hired that is doing the education activities, the city attorney, and the facilitators. This also will include the board chair and vice chair, and this is a lot of that technical support that the board chair and vice chair get. And this is the group that prepares the agenda with the input from the board and brings you your educational activities and other materials as you need a request. And then there are the staff liaisons, who are your primary contact and the interface between yourself and the city council, city manager, and departments. Tonight here with us, we have Eduardo, who acts as a staff liaison and provides as a technical resource and updates the website and helps with all of the record keeping and monitoring the board's effectiveness. Any questions or comments around kind of the organization of the board beyond the chair and vice chair? Okay, moving on. And this is that recommendation process. So the goal for the board, provide an opportunity to learn and share perspectives with each other, collectively provide that feedback to city council. So we will have a discussion of a meeting topic, could occur over 1 or several meetings. Some of our topics that we discussed earlier are, wouldn't say meatier than others because they all have an impact on the community, but some of them may require more discussion and more weeks of education. And then there will be a group formulation of that recommendation. Myself, Tammy, Eduardo will facilitate and take notes and capture that discussion. And then prior to finalizing that recommendation, each board member will have an opportunity to present their views, which can be documented with the recommendation. I would like to recommend there maybe be a 4th step to Valerie's point earlier that has to do with authorizing someone to then speak on behalf of the board about that to the city, about that recommendation to the city council, if that is appropriate, if there is some recommendation. And then beyond that, there is a voting process, which was defined as 12 of the 15 members as consensus, and that was defined in the city council document. Alternates are not allowed to vote, but are encouraged to provide comments throughout the process. Any questions, concerns, comments on the recommendation process and decision-making process? Scheherazade.
I guess my question is, it says if the board does choose to vote on a recommendation, how do we choose if we're going to vote? Do we vote on it? I mean, what? I guess I see a never-ending cycle of voting now. Yeah, is it just like a majority discussion, or at what do we say, like, if it reaches this amount of discussion without a decision, then we'll put it to a vote? Like, what do we do there?
That is a great question. There's a lot of ways that it can happen. I mean, we've had a lot of conversations already where decisions have been reached without a formal vote based on what looks like kind of group consensus and no dissent. But there are more formal methods. Robert's Rules of Order is one that jumps to mind. Valerie, did you have a suggestion?
Yeah, Scheherazade, I hate it when meetings do that. You know, it's I really dislike long, inefficient meetings. And so what has worked well in the past on boards that I've been on is if you have someone who is running the meeting and it seems that we're just talking in circles, you can always take a straw poll where you say, okay, well, let's just put a pin in it and see where people stand on it. Because then typically what happens in that circumstance is you will have the majority of people will fall out on one side or the other. And so it allows us to move forward. So I think there are ways to address that and keep the meetings efficient. But I share your concern that these meetings not end into an endless cycle of sort of navel gazing.
And as in my role as the facilitator, I will strive to move that conversation forward and to keep us driving at consensus as much as possible and to keep the unnecessary voting, although there may be some very contentious topics that do require to vote. So I don't want to take that off the table. But yeah,
I don't think we're going to be all that shy about that either. So.
I don't think so. I don't think it's going to be a problem. And Jeff, I see your hand.
Yes, thank you. And it might be in the next slide about city council recommendations and reports, but I haven't read that far quite yet just now. When the chair and vice chair are making the official recommendation to the city council, can that meeting be open to members of the board, even if we're not also, the chair or vice chair?
I do not know what city council's process would be on that. It's a good question. Shelby, do you have any insight? Or is that something we should table for next week to answer?
I think Liz had her hand up.
Oh, Liz, yes.
Sorry, I'm chomping at the bit to speak. In this case, when we have our council meetings with all of our boards and committees, we want as many of the board members there as possible. Often the chair, when they have a regular chair, will sort of lead off their presentation or discussion. And often they call on different members of their board, not everybody necessarily, but to present different aspects of whatever they're doing. And sometimes in those cases, if Valerie isn't the main presenter, but she presents part of it, then the council will ask Valerie specific questions about her presentation. So even if not everybody speaks, it's helpful to have everybody that can be there. And to repeat myself, often there are a couple of lead presenters, and then depending on the breadth of the recommendation or conversation, they'll actually call on a couple of other people to provide different aspects. So yeah, I think, when we're making recommendations, to have as many people there as can be is great. But it's probable that not everybody would speak.
Thank you, Liz, for that information on the city council process. So we are 4 minutes away from closing, so I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I feel like this was a hugely productive evening. We covered a lot of ground, farther than I had expected to get tonight. So thank you all for your comments and such a productive discussion. I think that was just wonderful. So my action items are, I will go back and clean up the topic schedule and resend that out to everybody. And then going into our meeting next week, we will begin in the same way with a welcome and roll call. We still have the public comment period open. So we will have any comments that come in via email or even handwritten. We welcome letters that come in, as well as if any members of the public decide to speak. And then we will move right back into kind of that recommendation process. I don't think we were quite done with that discussion, so we'll come back to that, as well as finish out the work plan. And I think we will have plenty of time to do Tigard Policing 101 next meeting, Commander, if that works for you. Excellent. And we will elect our first chair and vice chair for the early action and hiring topics. So that is on the schedule for next week, unless anybody has anything they would like to add.
Not next week though, right?
Not next week, 2 weeks from now. All right, well, thank you all very much. Have a wonderful evening.
Thank you, Kim.